Welcome to the Wednesday, February the 3rd, 2010 meeting of the Municipality of Anchorage Platting Board. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Lendl Story.
Here.
Steve Abel.
Here.
Ken Fuller.
Here.
Ellen McKay.
Here.
Michael Krieger.
Here.
Anastasia Taylor.
Here.
Jody Moses.
Here.
Carol Stolte.
Here.
Daniel Young.
Present.
Okay, we're all present, which is amazing. And the next order of business is approval of action summaries. We have action summaries for Wednesday, January the 6th, 2010, Monday, January 18th, 2010, and Monday, January 25th, 2010. May I have a positive motion, please? Mr. Krieger, and a second? Ms. Moses. Is there any objection to the motion? Seeing none, the motion passes and the action summaries are approved. We have no minutes for this meeting. Under special order of business, I would like to ask for possible disclosures. Mr. Story?
Yes, Madam Chair, in case S11650-3, I would like to disclose that my firm, R&M Consultants, is under contract with the Municipality of Anchorage and Heritage Land Bank to perform professional services for this case. And Mr. Hale, who is employed by R&M Consultants, is representing the petitioner tonight. I do have professional and financial involvement in the case. Therefore, I would like to recuse myself from participating.
Is there a motion regarding Mr. Story's participation? Ms. Taylor?
I move that Mr. Story be directed to participate in this. I have a question on this. If we previously directed him to not participate on this case, does that carry over, or do we do a new one every time?
Madam Chair.
I think it was just cleaner if we do one every time.
Okay. I will not be supporting my motion based on Mr. Story's information.
Any other, no, Mr. Krieger seconded. Any other discussion? But because there is objection, we'll need to vote. So a yes vote directs him to participate, and a no vote. And a no vote means that he doesn't participate. Mr. Young, did you vote?
I don't have an opportunity on my screen. Should I log out and log back in, or?
Okay. Yeah, log out and log back in, and this is under. Oh, no. That doesn't mean that you're fine. Okay. Thank you.
That's my name, right?
That's got your name right, and you should be able to vote. If you don't mind, I'll just plug your vote in, and got to look into the
Okay.
Technology, isn't it wonderful?
I don't mind.
That motion fails, and Mr. Story will be asked to step out at that when the case is introduced. Are there any other disclosures? Mr. Young.
Okay. In the case of S11650-3, Bolton Hills subdivision, I have worked as an employee for R&M in the 1980s. I have not worked on this case. I have no financial interest in this case or in the matter of this case. My firm has also worked for Heritage Land Bank in the past. We have no ongoing business relationships, and I have not worked on this property, and I have no financial gain or financial interest on this matter tonight.
I have a motion regarding Mr. Young's participation. Mr. Krieger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to direct Mr. Young to participate in the proceedings concerning Holt Hill subdivision.
Seconded by Mr. Fuller. Mr. Krieger, will you speak to your motion?
Yeah, I will support this. I didn't hear anything that sounded like a material conflict of interest. Prior employments going back in the years won't disqualify a person.
Okay. Is there any other discussion? Is there any objection to the motion? Seeing none, Mr. Young, you are directed to participate.
I have one more disclosure, Madam Chair.
Okay.
In the case of S11788-1, the U.S. Postal Service main carrier station, I was an employee of the presenter tonight, Dowell, back in the 1980s, early 1980s. I have not worked for them as an employee since the 1980s. Also, my firm and Dowell we are working with the same clients toward the same goals, but I'm not working directly with them. I have no involvement in this case, and I have no potential financial gain for the matters in front of us tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Young. May I have a positive motion on Mr. Young's participation in the Postal Service case? Ms. Taylor.
I move Mr. Young be directed to participate in this case.
Seconded by Ms. Stolpe. Would you speak to your motion, please?
I intend to support my motion. I heard nothing in Mr. Young's presentation that would lead me to vote against his participation.
Is there any other discussion? Is there any objection to the motion? Seeing none, the motion passes and you are directed to participate. Okay. And any other disclosures?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Madam Chair, in case S11756-1, I would like to disclose that the CEO for R&M Consultants and a personal friend of mine, Brett Coburn, will be testifying tonight. I don't have any personal, professional, or financial interest in the case, but I do have a friend and the CEO of R&M in the audience tonight that will be testifying.
Okay. How do you feel? Do you feel that you can make a...
I feel that I could be unbiased in the case. I do feel that I might be a little uncomfortable just with, not knowing what will be discussed in the case. So I would be uncomfortable, I guess. I would be unbiased, but maybe uncomfortable.
Okay. May I have a positive motion on Mr. Story's participation in the Seabreeze case? Mr. Krieger?
Well, I'll kick the ball off. I move to direct Mr. Story to participate in this case.
Ms. Stolpe seconded. Any discussion or speak to your motion?
I'm going to support the motion. I'm not sure what the source of Mr. Story's discomfort might be other than at the water closet tomorrow or at the water fountain having to say, why did you vote against me on that? But it sounds like he's prepared to do it as an unbiased participant. So with that representation, I'm comfortable.
Any other discussion? Ms. Taylor, is this an old thing on here? Oh, okay. If there's no discussion, is there any objection to the motion? Seeing none, then you're directed to participate. Ms. Taylor.
I have two disclosures this evening. The first one is case S10625, Eagle Crossing subdivision.
We're not going to hear those cases tonight.
Oh.
That's my next statement. Okay. And on that note, there has been postponements to the agenda. Both cases D and E, the Equal Crossing subdivision cases, case S10625-10, Equal Crossing subdivision, and case S11496-4, Equal Crossing subdivision, have been postponed to the March 3rd meeting. So if you're here for those cases, they will not be heard tonight, but they will be heard at the March 3rd meeting. Okay. There was nothing on the consent agenda this time, no old business, and so first case is new business, case S11756-1 Seabreeze subdivision. May we have staff's presentation, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. There are late comments that were submitted by the public and one agency. I direct the board to look at the comments that were laid on the table for them this evening. There's a comment from Jess Grunblatt, and then a comment from the Traffic Department. There's another comment from Jess Grunblatt, and then a comment from Brett Coburn, and then a comment from, long comment from Miss Nancy Pease that are all part of the late comments. If the public looks at page 11 of the packet, or the board looks at the plats that they have in front of them, or page 11, you can see what's at issue for this vacation request. The petitioner has abutting his property on the village's scenic parkway, 100 foot of right-of-way and 100 foot of a screening easement. That's 200 feet of encumbered land. The petitioner wants to vacate 20 feet of the right-of-way and move the screening easement, the 50-foot wide screening easement abutting on his property to meet the new lot boundary. The Rabbit Creek Community Council has not submitted comments for this case, but they submitted comments along with many people from the public, most in opposition to the petitioner's request. They submitted them for an earlier version of this case when the petitioner sought to both vacate the right-of-way and vacate or reduce the screening easement. In this case, the petitioner is only seeking to reduce to vacate the right-of-way. He will not be reducing the screening easement. The head of the Rabbit Creek Community Council has informed me that they want their comments to stand. That is in opposition to the petitioner's request to vacate the right-of-way. Project Management and Engineering Department and the Traffic Department have no objection to the vacation request. Village's Scenic Parkway, was platted with 100 foot of right-of-way and then 50 foot of screening easement either side, on both sides of the property, or of the right-of-way. The official streets and highways plan, which shows classifies roads, does not show the Village's Scenic Parkway, which means that it's a local road requiring between 50 and 60 feet of right-of-way. Currently, it has 100 feet of right-of-way. Therefore, the petitioner is entitled to ask for 20 foot of vacation. That is, half the right-of-way is 50 feet. He only needs to provide 30 feet. Therefore, he can ask for 20 feet of vacation. The department has no objection to the vacation request for the right-of-way, nor objection to the request to move the screening easement out to meet the new lot boundary, should this be approved. There's a plat note on page, the department recommends approval of the request to vacate 20 foot of right-of-way of Village's Scenic Parkway. The department recommends approval of the request to vacate and rededicate 20 feet with the screening easement along the east boundary of Lot 3 Seabreeze subdivision. The department recommends approval of the plat, subject to conditions 1 through 6 on pages 8 and 9. I'd point to one of the conditions, 6A, which states that parking is prohibited within the screening easement. That's intended to ensure that the integrity of the screening easement is maintained. Also, condition number 4 on page 8 says install buffer landscaping within the screening easement. The department felt that if the vacation request for the right-of-way is approved and the screening easement is to be bumped out to meet the new lot boundary, then buffer landscaping, our highest landscaping requirements, be required to be installed in the area which was formerly right-of-way. With that, I have no other comments. Be happy to answer any questions that you'd have. Thanks.
Are there any questions for Mr. McLaughlin?
Yes, thank you. On page 4, Mr. McLaughlin, the non-motorized transportation coordinator reports that they oppose the vacation, and I wonder if you would speak to that.
Well, I'm not sure why the non-motorized transportation coordinator, the trails coordinator, opposes the vacation. She sees this as a rural area. She sees that maybe this is an opportunity for a trail to be located within this 100 foot of right-of-way. Therefore, she doesn't support the vacation. However, this is a rural road. If it were to be rebuilt as a deluxe road, it still would only, it'd probably be 24-foot wide road, 2 9 or 10-foot travel lanes with a separated pathway on one side. It still wouldn't need the 60-foot of right-of-way, which the department is comfortable with, and the traffic department is comfortable with, and project management and engineering. I think that the trails coordinator would also agree that all trails are located within the right-of-way, not within private property. So there's, with this vacation, and if there's a vacation on the other side of the right-of-way on the property across the street, there would still be ample space to accommodate a separated trail. So I guess that I'll leave the comments from the trails coordinator to stand.
Thank you. Through the chair. On page number 47, at the second to last paragraph, watershed management says to resolve with watershed management and private development the need to revegetate all exposed soils in the subdivision under the developer's control by June 18th, 2010. I noticed that wasn't in the recommendations. Is there an issue with erosion or unstabilized soils on this property?
Through the chair, Mr. Young, that comment applies to the Eagle Crossing subdivision, not to this case. It's confusing the way that it's written, but if you look right above that paragraph, it's referring to that case, the Eagle Crossing subdivision.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Any other questions of staff? Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing. And for the public hearing, we'll call on the procedure on the parliamentary agenda. That is the petitioner has 10 minutes to speak. Time is rebuttal of that petition. We're going to do about 5 minutes, and individual will have 3 minutes. Each time, by the timer appears in front, and it will be screened until we have 1 minute left.
Madam Chair, members of the board, my name is Charlie Forbes. I'm representing the petitioner, and we agree with staff's comments and have no objections to the conditions of approval. We believe that because this, back in 1985, Village Scenic Parkway was removed from the official streets and highway plan, and no longer intended for the use as more than a residential road, that we aren't asking anything out of reason by reducing the right-of-way from 100 feet to 60 feet. To give you an idea of what a 100-foot right-of-way does is, if you can think of the majority of Tudor Road, Old Seward, and International Road, which are four-lane roads with sidewalks and bike paths, that's what a 100-foot right-of-way is able to give you. So reducing this down to 80 feet doesn't impede in any way for future pedestrian or trails. And, in fact, even if they were to remain a neighborhood collector, the municipal requirements would still be a 60-foot right-of-way. And I'd like to reserve the rest of my time for rebuttal. Are there any questions?
On the plot that we have before us, it shows the location of the road, and it has an existing toe slope. Is that something that you've gone out and surveyed, that's the actual location shown, or is that an estimate?
Yes, ma'am. If you'll turn to page 11 of your packet, where I have the existing road shown, the dark line, what that is that's the actual edge of pavement of the road, or the strip paved up there. So the existing road is actually on the other side of the platted center line. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Brett Coburn. I live at 19141 Pine Ridge Circle, which is about a block off of Village's Scenic Parkway. I appreciate the opportunity to give you my comments this evening. I have some serious concerns about the case, and there's some things that seem to be missed. Village's Scenic, we probably have 10 to 20 more homes that need to be developed up on Village's Scenic Parkway. We have it's basically a temporary road. It's been chip sealed. We have some steep corners coming in, unsafe corners coming into our road. At the bottom of the road, we have sightline difficulties. We have a problem at the top of the road. There seems to be an issue that 60 foot is the proper right-of-way width. The truth of the matter is I don't think that a vacation is appropriate at this point in time. If we need to realign the road to fix these problems, you're going to need the full right-of-way width. We have serious drainage problems, drainage ditches. We have existing utilities. All of us are on wells and septic systems. As those septic systems fail, if we need to run sewer lines or water lines up into our homes, we have significant investments in our homes. I think you're going to need the full right-of-way width, and particularly because of the severe cross slopes on our road. 60 feet would be fine. Down in Anchorage properly, we have flat terrain. We've got perhaps 40-foot differentials in cross slopes. So when you look at cutting back those cross slopes at, say, a 2-to-1 angle of repose, it's going to take a much wider right-of-way width to handle that. The other issue I have is one of precedence. What will happen is if you approve this vacation, it will start a domino effect all the way up the road. I mean, free land. Any builder that comes to build out homes on our road is going to request a vacation of the right-of-way, and then the next piece that will drop, the next shoe that will drop, will be vacation of the screen easement. The truth of the matter is, the reason we have such a unique character in our neighborhood is because of this wide right-of-way width and the screen easements, which everybody who's built a home, who pays taxes, who's raised their families in the Village's Scenic neighborhood, has abided by for the past 33 years. So I would appreciate your support in denial of this. The truth is, this kind of smoke and mirrors is going on here. The petitioner should have simply asked for a vacation of the front lot setback, perhaps a vacation of the screening easement. He shouldn't ask the municipality of Anchorage to give him free land, almost 6,000 square feet, the size of a city lot, to assist him with construction of his home. If you have any questions for me, I'm somewhat up to speed on the issues here. I'll be happy to answer questions. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In reading through the packet, and if I'm in error on this, please tell me. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
As I understand it, the issue is that there's a minimum lot size in that area, and this piece of property doesn't meet that standard without this vacation. And if that's the case, he doesn't need I went up and took a look at this piece of property the last time it came before us, and as I understand the issue, he doesn't need the additional 6,000. I think you said 6,000 square feet.
It's 5,840.
That's pretty close to 6. In order to site his house, he just needs it to meet the standards of that area regarding lot size, if I'm remembering correctly.
A point of order?
Yes?
Point of order. I'm sorry. Through the chair, Ms. Stolpe, the minimum lot size is not an issue for this case. The lot as is meets the minimum lot requirement because they're allowed to count half the abutting right-of-way.
Okay, so where I was going with that was the vacation of the property, the vacation that we're being asked to approve, then doesn't affect either the siting of the house or the lot. Do you have another solution to how this matter could be handled? Because I
do, actually. The petitioner could move his house 20 feet south. I looked at the site plan. There's 70 feet between the rear of the lot and where he's proposing to site his house. It may cost some money in engineering to figure out a good driveway grading plan and a good site plan for his house, but the other solution would be to look at variance from the front front lot setback, or from the screen easement. But the idea of vacating the land, it just doesn't make sense at this point in time.
If I could just be permitted, because now I am truly confused. I thought it was the issue of the size of the lot where he needed the extra width, but you're saying it's because, and I'm going to have to figure out from somebody, you're saying it's where he wants to site his house is the issue.
It appears to me that he simply wants to site his house 20 feet closer to the road, and that there may be septic constraints or other constraints that are causing this, or he just wants land. He wants that land, that 20 foot of land in the right-of-way vacated. So that would be a good question for the petitioner. But it looks to me, if you look at the site plan in your packet, there's 70 feet between the rear lot line and his house, and there's a lot of land in that parcel to site the house on. I would assume that he's concerned about a steep driveway gradient, perhaps. But once again, everybody who's built in the Village of St. Parkway neighborhood has been able to overcome these types of difficulties without asking for a vacation.
Thank you very much. Thank you,
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Mr. Coburn? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just slow to hit the button there. Thank you. Through the chair, Mr. Coburn. I'm trying I'm looking at this proposed plat, and I'm trying to determine if the existing road, it looks like the existing road runs right down the middle of the platted road, or the right-of-way. Would that be correct so far?
I think it's off to one side.
Okay. So by moving by vacating that 20 feet and moving that into a screening easement, is there going to be any, isn't that already vegetated? I guess is what I'm getting at. It's already...
Well,
woods, so to speak?
Actually, the truth of the matter is a hydro axe was brought in and cut down all the vegetation, and then it was replanted.
Oh, when did that happen?
That happened maybe 2 years ago? Yeah, 2 years ago. So,
And follow-up question.
Mr. Krieger?
Are the lots to the, I guess it's the north and the south of the subject lot, are they presently occupied? What's the character of ownership in this neighborhood?
this is interesting. The Seabreeze subdivision was, at one time, it was a larger lot, and it has been broken up, subdivided into 3 smaller lots. And this is my concern, as we start vacating the lots, these larger parcels along Village of St. Parkway, you're going to incentivize builders to come in and split up the larger lots, which are the norm for our neighborhood, vacate the right-of-way, and we'll have, double the density, and we're seeing it happening right now. This is exactly what's happened. Large lots split into 3 lots. Now the petitioner's coming to the municipality of Anchorage to sort of vacate land to make the lot work. So, and we will see this repeat itself. I'll be back here in 2 or 3 months, and I'll be back here on Lot 1 of the Village of Pine Ridge subdivision. There was a backhoe in there 2 weeks ago digging test holes, and they will come to you and ask for a vacation of the right-of-way, and they want to narrow up the screen easement, and it'll work across the street, and it will have this domino effect all the way up the road.
Thank you.
Anything else? Anybody else? Question for Mr. Coburn? No. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to testify in case S11756-1? Come forward and state your name for the record, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Dick Tremaine. I'm here on behalf of the Rabbit Creek Community Council. I am secretary and have been asked to show up. It was nice that our chairman got a hold of staff, and the staff noted that we wanted our previous comments that are contained on page 63 to be brought forward. The only changes would be that we considered this again, the current request at our December meeting, and we forwarded these. We felt there was no reason to change what we'd said because this held, and that is basically we oppose the vacation right away, we oppose the screening easement request. That hasn't changed at all. It is, in fact, based on the current request. Madam Chair, building on the hillside, as you all know, is problematic because of topographical challenges, geologic challenges. Large lots are preferred, and smaller lots present challenges to developers. This is a lot, as you've just been told, that's been subdivided. It's smaller than it may well should be. It faces challenges, but that's not a reason to give up easements. Because to give up easements is to compromise the character of the community, compromise the character of the neighborhood, and compromise the integrity of existing right-of-ways. This is an ongoing theme in our area, and certainly it's something germane to this particular lot. People move to different places and live in different places for a lot of different reasons. And I don't want to second-guess motivations, but we have a homeowner that's already been shown that they didn't pay close attention to the requirements as stated by law and hydroaxed the property. There's an enforcement action that's in your packet that's talked about and agreed to and rectified. But those of us who have lived in the community a long time tend to, when we buy a piece of property, those are the rules, and we design accordingly. And vacation of an easement is showing that the rules wish to be changed. And that's fine sometimes, and sometimes it's just inappropriate, and this is one of those that's inappropriate. Madam Chair, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Tremaine? Mr. Krieger? Oh, sorry. Left.
I would push.
Any questions for Mr. Tremaine? I guess not.
Thank you very
much. Anyone else wishing to speak in this case? Wishing to speak in case S11756-1, Seabreeze subdivision.
Hello, my name is Nancy Pease, and I live on Village of Scenic Parkway. My written comments are at the end of your late comment packet, and I'll highlight a couple of my points. First, the conditions for vacation of right-of-way under AMC 2115-130 are clear and strict. Specifically, the petitioner has the burden to prove that the proposed area for vacation has no value to the municipality, and the standard is proof, not supposition. In fact, in this case, the staff report has multiple assertions and indications that the full 100 feet of right-of-way does have present and future value to the municipality and to nearby property owners. And I'd like to show that if you will look at the air photo on page 16 of your packet, in case you haven't been to the site. There's already a potential connector road that comes in from the right-hand side, sort of with a shallow arc, to Village of Scenic Parkway. And then if you travel up the page, which would be north, there's a slope all the way up to a little round bed where the denser development begins. And you look at that little bed, or that little circle, that should be labeled BS for blind spot. That's the first blind spot. Then if you continue to travel up Village of Scenic Parkway just to under the 5 at the top of the page, that's the other blind spot created by that big U-shaped curve. So there are 2 blind spots and a significant slope. If this road does take considerably greater traffic, or if Potter Valley Road takes the thousands of additional cars that it's expected, we are going to fix on those blind spots in that intersection that's right under the 5. And that may require tapering back well up Village of Scenic Parkway, possibly all the way back to that intersection where the connector comes in. So it would seem that this road could be best redesigned if the 100-foot right-of-way is still available to work within, especially because there are side slopes and a stream channel at the subject parcel. And it would seem that road designers could find the safest, most economical, and most environmentally sustainable design if they could redesign that road within a 100-foot right-of-way rather than 80 feet, and then determine what part of the right-of-way is surplus. We don't have that proof that that additional 80 feet or 20 feet is not beneficial. Second, the trail potential may also be compromised. Village of Scenic Parkway is already a destination for walkers because of the traffic on Potter Valley Road and the lack of shoulders there. And the non-motorized truck meter has said that we should preserve the potential for a trail, and we don't know where within the right-of-way it would go. Another point that I wanted to make is that the green belt effect of the vegetation easement is a highly valued public asset. And finally, just to sum up, let's not give away public easements to improve a poor subdivision layout. Seabreeze subdivision was platted with the developer's knowledge of the long-standing vegetation screening easement and the right-of-way. This site is still buildable with the easement and the right-of-way intact. Any constraints created by the developer should not be resolved at the expense of the neighborhood character, property values, and the potential future need for the right-of-way. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Mr. Fuller. Oh, Ms. Pease?
Excuse me. It appears kind of a lot of misalignments in the subdivision. You go 2 lots farther north, does the road go down to 30-foot easement or 50-foot right away?
My lot is 2 or 3 lots farther north, and I have a 50-foot wide easement on my property. My understanding is that it's I'm a 100-foot wide easement with 50 feet on each property, all the way to the end of the Scenic Parkway, but I don't have the full plat. But I do know to the bottom of this air photo, we all have 50 feet easements on our property on the west side of the road.
Once it leaves the Scenic Parkway, which is 2 lots up, and it becomes that switchback.
Oh, okay, at the top of the page. Yes, that is part of the Potter Creek development. And there again is a constraint for future traffic carried on Villages Scenic Parkway. That is a substandard width. It was built as a private, like the other roads in the old phases of Potter Creek, it was built as a private road with the idea that the subdivision would maintain it, and therefore they didn't need to have the shoulders, on-street parking, snow storage, anything like that. And there's actually a retaining wall that's about 10 or 12 feet high at the left edge of that road, and then the houses on the right have very steep driveways, so I doubt you could expand anything there. So, yeah, if the road does need to be upgraded, there's serious problems down there, which may necessitate a new alignment.
Immediately north of this property, that looks like a 200-foot. Is there some dedicated parkland or something?
No, that is and staff can correct me if I'm wrong, that is a green belt that was reserved in this latest phase of Potter Creek, and my understanding is that that green belt was partly to maintain the scenic green belt character of Villages Scenic Parkway.
And then this lot is further reduced by the stream setback?
That's my understanding.
Any other questions for Ms. Pease? Okay. Anyone else wishing to testify in case S11756-1? Seabreeze subdivision. Come forward and state your name for the record, please.
Sure. My name is Mike Dunn. I live at 19230 Village Scenic Parkway. I'm about an eighth of a mile left from there. Dunn, D-U-N-N.
D-U-N-N. Thank you.
And I've lived up on Village Scenic Parkway for almost 20 years, and people that live up there have had responsible building. Everybody set way back from the road. We're trying to keep it. It's one of the neatest places in Anchorage. And it's a beautiful place, and there's no reason this gentleman should be able to road at 6,000 square feet. When you first come up Village Scenic Parkway now, you come up and now there's this big, ugly scar where he illegally hydroaxed everything down, and really it looks like hell. And so now he's going to be rewarded and given 6,000 square feet of extra land for free so he can put his house where he wants to put it. It's not fair to all of us that have built according to the laws in that subdivision. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Dunn? Thank you. Anyone else wishing to testify?
Hello. I wasn't prepared to talk today, but my name is Jack Hurd, H-U-I-D, and I own the lot just below this gentleman behind me. Just a few comments. These are my neighbors, and I don't know them very well, so I don't want to get on your bad side. I'm just suggesting that what he's asking for is reasonable. It's not crazy. It's not going to destroy the neighborhood. Yes, he kind of made it look ugly after he plowed down his land, but he tried to remediate that. I anticipate here in the next few years that it's going to look beautiful. I've heard comments regarding a blind spot or two blind spots on Villages Scenic. I run that road just like Nancy Pease does on a daily basis. I don't really think it's problematic, and I don't think it's severe enough that they're going to rebuild or upgrade the road. They're making their arguments because they don't want him to get what he wants, and I understand that. But I'm just saying what he's asking it seems to be pretty reasonable to me, and something that maybe you might consider.
Any questions for Mr. Hurd? Mr. Fuller.
Yes, on your road access, what is the right-of-ways you have there?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Do you know what right-of-ways you have in front of your lot?
I do not, no, sir.
Okay, yeah, it appears to be considerably less than 100, yeah. Thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions for Mr. Hurd? Mr. Young.
Thank you, through the Chair. Mr. Hurd, is the expansion of this or moving this screening out toward the street, is this going to create any blind spots?
I can't imagine it creating blind spots. If you've been on the road, it seems pretty fairly straight. I don't see it. I'm not an engineer. So I can't say for certain.
Thank you.
Mr. McLaughlin, did you have something?
Point of information through the chair. Mr. Fuller, I'm just about to look for the plat, but the entire length of the Village's Scenic Parkway was platted as 100 foot of right-of-way, and it maintains 100 foot of right-of-way. There's been no reduction in the right-of-way, the full length of it.
Okay. Anyone else wishing to testify?
Just give you Madam Chair, my name is Jerry Luansky, and I live at 19500 Village Scenic Parkway. I oppose the petitioner's request, mainly for the technical reasons that were involved. I have sometimes a marginal well, and at some time in the future, there's no doubt in my mind we will need city water and sewer up that road. And without at least extensive engineering analysis of where the water and sewer should go to limit any future utility additions to my neighborhood seems, if nothing else, unjust. And to have the petitioner reduce the right of way in which that could occur at this point without the engineering seems to tie my hands and maybe even reduce my property values in the future. As the staff member from the city has said, the 100-foot right-of-way still exists along the entire length of that road, and I would like it to stay that way. Again, for most of the technical reasons that were involved, there are two streams that run across that road, permanent full-time streams, and two intermittent streams that run across there. And to correct those for glaciation in the future, I think we need to keep our options open and not reduce the right-of-way along this road. There are extremely steep parts to the sides of the existing road, and to me it makes no sense from a practical basis to give up options when utilities might have to come in there and take up wavering from one side of the road to the other to put in utilities. And again, I have a limited well. My own well has run dry, and if at some point in the future we all on this road need to go to public utilities, sewer and water, this may prevent us from doing that and really affect my property values. Thank you. And one other point. One of the reasons I live on this road is extremely rural and unique for Anchorage. And to change those characteristics really imposes somebody else's values on ours that live on this road. And the petitioner knew when he bought this land that was in fact the case. And we have enjoyed this type of neighborhood for a long time. My house was the second house built on this road. And we would like that character of the neighborhood to remain. So I oppose the petition at this time. Thank you so much.
Any questions for Mr. Luansky? Mr. Krieger.
Thank you. Through the chair. Mr. Lansky, can you tell us where on Scenic Parkway you live in relation to the petitioner's site?
I live, I guess you would say south, about maybe quarter mile, third of a mile.
Pardon me?
About a third of a mile south.
In the Villages subdivision or one to the south of that?
South of there.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Mr. Fuller, did you have something to say? Are you? No, okay. Mr. Krieger, are you?
I'm done. Thank you.
Ms. Moses.
Through the chair, I do have a couple of questions for you, and they seemingly are a reoccurring theme with the homeowners in the area, so hopefully you can answer. One is, when I reviewed you commented on your well and the future of public water and sewer potentially coming to the area. On AWW nor on-site water and waste had any objection to this, and I guess I'm just wondering where you and maybe some of your neighbors got the information that granting this tonight would make that public utility impossible to eventually be to service your home site.
Well, I get that from a practical standpoint is that if the right-of-way is if we're limiting where these utilities can be put in, it may preclude them ever being put in. I know, particularly in my property, I'm very close to bedrock. In fact, my driveway sits on bedrock, and part of my house does. And so I know construction there is difficult, and my guess is it would be difficult to put these utilities in. That way, and I'm concerned that with vacating part of the right-of-way, we're limiting our options on where these utilities could be in the future. And until that kind of engineering is done, I can't understand why all of us along that road would not be concerned that our options for these kind of utilities would be eliminated by vacating the right-of-way.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One more question, if I may. The current right-of-way is far greater, quite frankly, seemingly, than the other residential streets in this area, even reaching out even further on the hillside, quite frankly. Mm-hmm. And so I guess what I've been looking for in the public comment, including yours, is why should this street, what justifies it exceeding what the surrounding streets and what is required of a residential road, which is the designation of this this road? And I just haven't heard the answer to that, because it is far, this right-of-way is much bigger than most of the other residential streets. This is not a collector street anymore.
That's true, and I, to be quite honest, do not know why originally it was set up to be a 100-foot right-of-way. Although I know at this time, and having used it as much as I do, I live on this road, I can understand some of the engineering difficulties that would occur or can occur with any changes in the alignments of the road or putting in utilities, because directly across from my driveway is bedrock, and so that would preclude, or at least create some very, very difficult circumstances to put in, sewer and water. So, my guess is the right-of-ways that wide to accommodate these kind of things, because it's a very difficult place to build. It looked like there was a lot of fill brought in or cut-in fill put in to cover the bedrock and fill in some of the wet areas. That's just a guess on my part. But there must have been some logical reasons originally why it was set aside as a 100-foot right-of-way, and until the original builders can speak to that, I would not like and oppose any changes in this, which again might preclude changes in the road alignment or design and or future utilities along this road.
Through the chair, thank you, and I appreciate your testimony tonight. And there is in the packet provided some information on why the size was originally set at that, and that that if you're interested in that, and it's sure. Because at the time there's seemingly from the information we've been provided, because it was a different kind of road, if you will. So, but thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Mr. Lewanski? Something from, Mr. Young?
Thank you, through the chair. Do you have, Mr. Lewanski, do you have any knowledge that there's exposed bedrock in this area in front of the property that's in front of us tonight?
I don't, but knowing the area, and I've hiked it quite a bit, I would not be surprised if there was.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Lewanski? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Anyone else wishing to testify? In case S11756-1.
Madam Chair, members, my name is David Tisch, and I live at 1892 on Village of Scenic Parkway. I've sat here and I listened to pros and cons, why you should and shouldn't be able to go ahead and develop this land, and I'm going to be as fair and objective as I can on this. I live directly across the street from the petitioner, and I would probably be impacted the most of anybody on Village of Scenic Parkway. Village's Scenic Parkway is probably the most beautiful and one of the most unique residential drives in all of Anchorage, with outstanding views and wildlife. To be honest here, I'm going to object, and I'm not going to object to certain things. I think the petitioner can, in my opinion, develop his piece of property without impacting. Now, this is going to irritate a lot of my neighbors, and I thought real hard before I came up here and said this. And as you heard in the first case, you're going to hear case by case as developers come before you and ask for variances and easements and in right-of-ways. And I strongly feel that each one of these developers and homeowners or future homeowners should be heard case by case. Because Village's Scenic, again, is the most beautiful and unique residential drive in all of Anchorage. But without impacting the beauty or the neighborhood, I cannot reasonably and honestly stand before you and say a homeowner should not be able to develop his land responsibly and without impacting the neighborhood. And I can't see it. I mean, it's any time that you put a footprint on any piece of wild property, or you're going to have an impact of somewhat. But I can't say I've got my piece of the pie now, and I'm going to refuse a fellow Alaskan an opportunity to go ahead and develop his house or his home and do it in a reasonable way. I know nothing about the geology of the area. I do know the road was at one time designed to be a collector road. If this is done reasonably and with constraints and with the regulations that are in place to manage our homes and how we build them in Anchorage, I'm going to have to stand before you, and I'm sure I'm going to irritate my neighbors, but I'm going to say I do not object to this if it is done reasonably. I think every opportunity should be given to residents in this town to go ahead and develop their piece of property where it does not disturb the rest of the neighborhood or impact it. And I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Tisch. Mr. Krieger?
Through the Chair, thank you, Mr. Tisch, for your comments. I appreciate your coming and your careful comments. Some people are saying that the landowner could reasonably develop his property without getting this 20-foot easement into this 20-foot piece of ground into the existing right-of-way. Mm-hmm. That he could, well, there's some issue about whether he needs to move his house further back away from the setback or whether he needs a lot size. But so my question to you is, do you know something about this development that makes you believe that he can't do it if he doesn't get this vacation of 20 feet of the right-of-way? And if so, what is it?
Well, I look at his lot is down the slope from mine. And without knowing, again, the geology or anything about the perk testing or the lot, I'm be honest with you, I'm going to say no. Now, the testimony I heard this evening, I mean, this individual's house is 35 foot off of the road, maybe that much. I mean, so there's some hypocrisy here, and that's what bothers me the most. You can't say I have mine and now you can't have yours. If it's done responsibly, if it's done reasonably, I do not object. I do object to any type of abuse of the land, abuse of what it is that we have on Village's Scenic Parkway. And I think if this was done properly because of the downslope, I think it could be done without impacting the area. I really do. Again, I think I would be impacted the most. But there are other things about Village's Scenic that do bother me. But this I don't think would be one of them. Any more questions, please? I
have a follow-up question to that because I'm not connected here. Your assumption is that if we deny this vacation, that this landowner won't be able to develop his property.
Sir, I don't know. I'm just
let's just stop there.
Sure. I don't know.
The issue of whether or not he can develop his property or can't may not be before us. He may be able to develop it without getting this 20-foot right-of-way.
Correct, sir. I don't know.
We should probably put to the petitioner later on. Thank you.
I have no idea.
Thank you.
Mr. Fuller.
Yeah, when you say you're across the street, is that tract 7B or is that lot 1?
That means tract 7B, directly across the street.
7B, okay.
That's
Now,
right.
who maintains the road or the sides of the road currently? Is there a community council or the city that currently?
It's a limited road, so it's.
Well, I know everybody talks about these screening easements. Who actually does the planning or takes care of the screening, or is it just al natural?
Well, some of the landowners on Villages Scenic Parkway have developed their lots all the way to the edge of the road. There are 5 of them that have, but beautiful landscaped where they have enhanced and beautified the property.
To the edge of the road?
Right to the edge of the road, yes, sir.
To the pavement, or?
It's not pavement, it's an oil-based gravel.
The edge of the oil-based gravel?
Yeah.
Well, isn't that city property?
Is it what?
Wouldn't that be city property, though?
I don't know if it would be or not, but I'm just telling you what I know. Okay. Well, the laws and the zoning and everything else, I mean, this is your area of expertise. I'm just going to stand here before you and tell you it is what I know to be the truth and what it is that I see. The majority of Villages Scenic Parkway is wilderness. And because it's wilderness, we have a lot of wildlife, which is part of the reason a lot of people live in this area. I mean, we have a lot of moose and lynx and occasional wolf and caribou, coyote. But the majority of the property that you're questioning is most of it is untouched.
Okay. Then now, when he gets this additional 20 feet, that's still under the landscape condition, though. I mean, it's to be maintained in a...
Well, I understand it, but that portion of that screening easement would still be from Villages Scenic into the property, and he's requesting from the property into it this way, so there would still be that screening easement. That's the way I see it.
He just would have 20 extra feet to do that in, right? Yeah. And the city had 6,000 feet less that they have to maintain.
Yeah.
So, okay, thank you.
Sure. Any more questions? Thank you, Madam Chair. Members?
Thank you, Mr. Tisch. Anyone else wishing to testify? Anyone at all? Okay, we'll hear from the petitioner. You have 8.5 minutes for rebuttal.
Madam Chair, members of the board, just real quick on some of the comments that have been made regarding the alignment of the road. If you turn to page 16 again and look at the aerial photograph, you can see that on either side of our property for at least 600 foot in either direction, the road is straight. So as far as affecting side distances or anything, this would not impact that whatsoever. Heard a lot of people concerned about future water and sewer coming to the subdivision, upgrading the road. I'm not aware of anything in the future in future plans of upgrading this road. But if you'll take a look at the picture starting on page 31 of the packet, I've drawn on there a plotted center line showing the road on the east side. You would kind of make out the pavement, and then on the west side is our property. And if you look at the slopes, you can see that that's relatively flat for at least the first 30 feet past that center line. And I guess that's probably about all the pictures reflect that. Then I'd like to bring your attention to the picture on page 32, to give you an idea of where the 30-foot mark is from the center line back to the property. That's where we'd like the property line to now come to, is where I have that little circle. We can see how flat that is there. Then, back on page 31, I wish I'd taken more pictures of the property to the east, but the slope for this subdivision is upslope is to the east, downslope is to the west. And the part of the right-of-way, the 30 feet that would still be part of the right-of-way, and then the 50 feet that would be the new screen easement. In reality, this lot, that's the flat part would be the first 30 feet, and then the other 50 feet would be the general sloping, and then it takes a quick drop after that. But the reason why I want to point that within that 30 feet how far it is, you can see that there's no limitations that you would have in putting in a water and sewer if that was to go through. Same thing with trails, bike paths, or sidewalk. A lot of what we talked about tonight is the character of the neighborhood. And what we're talking about, 20 feet, I pasted just before we started, but from the front of Ms. McKay, just about where Mr. Schaefer's sitting is about 20 feet. That's the amount that we're wanting to vacate. And essentially what we're doing is we're taking the property line and the 50-foot screen easement and moving it 20 feet. And so if you look at the center line of the road that's platted, which is also the platted center line, and then the edge of the road, we still have 80 feet to where he could 80 feet would be the closest he could possibly build his house, and he would be downslope. So the perception of changing the character of the neighborhood, we would be hard-pressed to even be able to tell the difference in that 20 feet. In talking about side slopes, with this part being vacated, you can see that there are no side slopes on that side of the road on this property. I guess it's up to us to prove that this is in excess of what the municipality needs, and it's pretty obvious that we're still maintaining an 80-foot right-of-way in a road that's a residential road. It is in excess of what the community needs for land in the future, and it does benefit our property to be able to move that screening easement up 20 feet. It was mentioned that we could ask for a variance, and really we can't ask for a variance because we'd still have to come here first, because we're supposed to exhaust other avenues before we ask for a variance. And this is the best solution for us to build the house to where it benefits the property owner and the slopes of the property. And it gives us the opportunity to have less steep of a drive because, like I said, the better portion of the property is within the 50-foot right-of-way and the 50-foot screen easement, and then it takes a real steep slope down. Are there any questions?
Mr. Fuller, were you in line? Okay. Mr. Krieger?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through the Chair, Mr. Forbes, you touched on an issue that I'm interested in the end there where you referenced variances. I asked one of the folks earlier whether or not the landowner would be able to develop his property, I guess put a house on it. if the board doesn't approve this vacation of the 20-foot right-of-way. But can you respond to that question?
Yes, sir, I can. Sure, we could build a house on it without the vacation of right-of-way and moving the screenings and that. Now, can we build something that... I guess what we're looking at is we're looking at... he plans on building a one-story house, and would like to drive into it. If we had to move the house back another 20 feet, then we're actually looking at least a two-story house. It's easy to design the house because the way the property is slope-wise by bringing it up than it would be to try to build the house where we'd have to without the vacation. Is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, if you have any questions as far as on the design or future plans for landscaping enhancement on the screenings, I'd be more than happy to entertain.
I have just a follow-up question for the petitioner's representative, if I can. So what was the talk about a variance? I don't remember hearing that. You picked up something that I didn't catch.
Simon mentioned that, Bill Coburn had mentioned that we could have just asked for a variance rather than coming and asking for the vacation of right-of-way.
All right. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Forbes? Mr. Young.
Yes, through the chair. On the recommendations on number 6 on page 9, on letter A, parking is prohibited within the screening easement. How would that be enforced?
Just like everybody else in the village of City Parkway would not allowed to park in the screening easement there either. It's kind of redundant to the code.
Okay, thank you. And if a vacation is not granted and a two-story house is constructed, how would that impact the viewscape compared to the one-story?
Well, it would definitely affect Mr. Tisch that testified tonight, because then it would be obviously sitting up higher.
Thank you. No other questions?
Any other questions for the petitioner's representative? Seeing none? Okay.
Thank you.
I figured this probably was a lot easier if you had questions directed as far as on exactly what we were planning. There have been some changes on the property. We've actually owned the property for 10 years. Due to having a part of use subdivision at the north end, it basically effectively, because it's a pie-shaped lot, took about approximately one-third of our northern half of our lot and basically made it unbuildable. Several years ago, originally the creek overflow, whatever you want to call it, was never listed as any type of a stream protection area. 2 years ago, they redesignated that. That was absolutely the widest part of our lot. So effectively, that took approximately the south 65 feet width at the widest part and effectively took that out of the equation too. So we got cut off from both ends. When we originally looked at this, we said, how are we going to go ahead and do the biggest? We've had a couple questions here. First of all, we say, hey, we hydroax a lot. Well, we had 126 dead standing spruce trees. We're planting the landscaping in several phases. We spent approximately $28,000 in replanting 34 conifers along the screening easement and proposed screening easement. Phase 2 of our landscaping plan actually is going to go into effect here this spring. We're approximately going to start putting in approximately 8 to 12, 8 to 10 foot high conifers along the screening easement, and then making spot placements of other trees and to go ahead and basically repopulate the entire screening easement to make it aesthetically blend into the neighborhood. It does take several years. It doesn't happen all at once. The reason that Mr. Forbes had pointed out here is that because of the gradual slope and then followed by a gentle slope and then a very steep drop.
You have to sum up now.
Okay. Well, sum up is basically as we could Well, the reason we're doing this is that we could take a 3- or 4-story home that basically would not be aesthetically pleasing. By cutting back into the hill approximately 10 to 15 to 18, 20 feet, we can put a 1-story home in that's effectively blends into the hillside, blends into what they like in the neighborhood, and make it basically more aesthetically pleasing for the neighborhood, but it would not conflict with the neighborhood's perception. Any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Schaefer? Mr. McLaughlin?
Madam Chair, I had just a couple points of information I'd like to add to what was said.
Okay.
But I don't know if the petition...
Anything for Mr. Schaefer?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Is there anything for Mr. Schaefer? Seeing none, thank you very much. Okay. Mr. McLaughlin?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to point out again to the Platting Board that the Community Council, Rabbit Creek Community Council's comments are on page 63 of the packet, and all the comments from the public are immediately behind it. There was a question about water and sewer being extended to this down the street. This is outside of the Anchorage Water and Wastewater Utility Service area, far outside of it. It's not realistic to think that water and sewer will ever be extended out here because of the cost. Another point I wanted to make was that on page 78 of the packet, you can see the original plat of the subdivision. This is a 1977 plat. You can see that at the time that this original subdivision occurred in 1977, Village of Scenic Parkway was intended to be sort of a major collector street on the hillside. That's no longer the case. The classification of the street is just simply as a local road requiring between 50 and 60 feet of right-of-way. The topography in this area is very steep. There are not only steep topography, but actual cliffs and drops on the lots. Because of the topography and the location of the Chugach State Park, the large lots required in this zoning district, the R6 requires an 1.25 acre size lots, and the requirement for all on-site, all lots having on-site well and septic are required to have 40,000 square feet within their lot boundaries. For all of those reasons, this local road will always be a local road. It will never become a collector road. That's what drove the change in classification of this street. I have no other comments. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. Mr. Krieger?
And just a point of order or a question for the chair. We had two sort of speakers on behalf of the petitioner, and the landowner, I guess Mr. Schaefer or whomever, kind of came in later. I wonder, I appreciate hearing those comments, but I wonder whether we should consider opening the testimony up to other members of the public who might want to respond to what. I mean, you could have gavelled him down, I suppose, and said, "Hey, you're out of order. You had your 10 minutes." And
he didn't. He was within the 10 minutes, though,
okay.
And he tacked on to the end of the rebuttal time.
Okay,
so.
But I wonder whether is it appropriate to. I mean, he suggested that the adjacent landowners might like it because he wouldn't be building a 3- or 4-story house instead of the 1-story house. And does it make sense to open up the public testimony to hear if any of the people who previously testified have anything to say there, or are we just beating a dead horse here?
We're beating a dead horse, and they can only testify once in any matter anyway, so.
Well, my point, I guess, was that that testimony came as part of the rebuttal and wasn't presented by the petitioner initially, so anybody who came after him wouldn't have had a chance to respond to that until it kind of came in at the end. But I'm just raising a question, I guess, procedure, and I'll defer to the chair's judgment on it.
I see it as just a part of the rebuttal.
Thank you.
Clarification. Okay.
Madam Chair.
Ms. Dolpe.
I have some questions for staff. Is this the appropriate time?
This is the appropriate time.
Okay, thank you. Mr. McLaughlin, I don't have the paperwork from the last time we dealt with this issue, but it hasn't been very long. Seems to me like it was in October or November, maybe. Could you, and we don't, I couldn't find it in here. If it's in here, what the petitioner was requesting at that time versus what he's requesting now, and I just don't have a memory of that. Could you explain to us what the difference is between the petitioner's request of the last 3 or 4 months ago and tonight?
Through the chair, Ms. Stolpe, I think there's a short discussion of it on page 7, but essentially the original request was to reduce both the screening easement and so to vacate screening easement and vacate right-of-way. This request is only to vacate right-of-way and not to vacate screening easement. He's having to ask for a 20-foot vacation of screening easement, but he's then rededicating it closer to the street so that it effectively is not reduced. I think that one other point that I'll just sort of tap onto that is on the late comments that were received, we have some comments from Jess Greenblatt, and Jess says on the last paragraph of comments, if the board approves, if the board, this neighbor is requesting that the vacation of the right-of-way be denied. But if it were to be approved, if the board approves, I hope it will include language that strongly promotes the maintenance of the screening easement to mitigate impact to the rural character of Village's Scenic Parkway and to discourage subsequent variance requests. I think the point that that this neighbor is trying to make is that because of the possible precedent-setting nature of this case, if this is the first case to have a vacation of right-of-way, that in the board's findings, they make a strong finding that the board does not support a reduction of the screening easement. If the board finds that the vacation of right-of-way meets the municipal policy and approves the vacation of the right-of-way, not to make a statement that would not support now or in any other future case support a reduction in the screening easement is what this person is asking for. Thank you.
Mr. Krieger, did you have another question?
I have another question, Madam Chair.
Ms. Stolpe.
On page 6, under comments and proposal, the third paragraph, I had asked you about that earlier, and now I'm a bit confused. And I wonder if you could walk us through this paragraph and explain to us the ramifications of that.
Basically, that paragraph's irrelevant. It's just sort of information about the property. It has no bearing on this case at all. In the R6 district, you're required to have 1.25 acres of lot size. Within the boundaries of within his lot boundaries, he doesn't have 1.25 acres. But in the R6 district, just in this specific district, you're allowed to count half the abutting right-of-way towards the area of your lot. And so when you count that area, he's well beyond the 1.25 acres. So it's just information about the property, as if I were to talk about the slope or other things.
And he has that now without any decision from this board?
That's correct.
Any other questions of staff from the board? If not, then would like a positive motion on the case, please. I think I did. I thought I did. Okay. She doesn't think I did. The public hearing is closed. There we go. Now, could I have a positive motion on the case S11756? Mr. Krieger.
In the case of S11756-1 Seabreeze subdivision. I move to approve the vacation of the 20-foot of the right-of-way. Find my staff recommendation here. Move to approve the request to vacate 20 feet by 292 feet of the village's scenic park right-of-way.
Mr. Fuller seconds. Mr. Krieger, would you speak to your motion, please?
Yep. Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't intend to support this application to vacate the 20-foot right-of-way. I think it's a close case, and I just from my perspective, one of the most important things the Platting Board does is give away right-of-ways, and I don't believe that the petitioner has carried the burden of proof to establish that this 20 feet has no benefit to the municipality or otherwise met the standards. I don't think that the denial of this application to vacate the right-of-way is going to prevent the petitioner from putting a house on his ground, and if it does, then I suppose it's sort of buyer beware. I was impressed by the argument that there may need to be a fix to redesign the road. I was impressed by the trails folks that say they want to preserve the potential for the trail. And I guess in sum, to repeat, I don't think the burden has been carried here. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Mr. Story?
Yes, I also will not be supporting the motion. I don't think there was proof that the 100 feet is in excess or the right-of-way to be vacated is in excess. I don't think that there has been adequate engineering analysis or studies or plan development that would indicate that the right-of-way is in excess. And I really don't think the municipality should be burdened with a potential for additional expenses for possible realignments or possible trails or possible utilities that may go in the alignment. I also think that it compromises the character, the continuity of the neighborhood. Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Fuller?
I'm going to support the motion. I think that the property rights are sacred, and the city got the property from the private owners, and they don't need it. There isn't any future or long-term future possibility that they're ever going to need it. And the setbacks for the screening are still in effect, so you're still going to have the same screening for the neighbors and the general public. And I think that the property should go back. And I would like to see return all this 20 foot to all the property people there, and they ought to get together and just make a realignment of whatever they need to efficiently run their own subdivision. But at the same time, they can maintain their screening. There's more than enough room there.
Mr. Krieger?
I'm out of the queue. I've already made my pitch, but I was going to respond to Mr. Fuller's comment just briefly if nobody else was in the queue. I also thought about whether or not the 100 feet is necessary, and I guess I think that, and I confess I'm not familiar with how the municipality would do it, but I guess I think that if the municipality thought that that doesn't need 100 feet, it could be happy with 60, that it ought to initiate some action to go through there and say, all right, for this whole road, we're going to give back this 20 feet on either side and reconvert it to a 60-foot, rather than have individual landowners come one at a time. I think that if the municipality thinks that it's got more land than it needs, then it can take the action to reduce its right-of-way. Thanks.
Mr. Fuller? Is your mic on?
The city's not going to spend the money to do that, but I think the private ownership should. Also, Mr. Schaefer's had it for over 10 years, and bit by bit, they're cutting him down into smaller usable portions of his own lot without any action on his part. All of a sudden, he's losing 65 feet on the south side, which I think he testified was the bigger, flatter area to build his house on. Now he crammed up into this corner over here, and it's not a corner to, the city lot downtown, but at the same time, he's dealing with those slopes out there. It's going to significantly impact him. And, the city's not going to voluntarily give their property back, but at the same time, they have no need for it, and it realistically should go back to the people that own the property that they took it from in the first place.
Ms. Moses?
Madam Chair, just to speak on Board Member Krieger and Mr. Fuller's comments, on page 22 of the packet, I too, quite frankly, a lifelong resident of the hillside, always want to be considerate of the character of the neighborhood and those who reside there. What I can't find in the facts or in the public comment or the petitioner's presentation is what's the justification? The city, kind of in response to you, Mr. Krieger, first off, the city essentially did go in there and changed the designated use of this road from a collector to a residential road. And even if it were still a collector, and this was a brand-new subdivision we were considering, it still wouldn't be held to this size standard. So I'm having trouble justifying, other than character of the neighborhood, denying this petitioner's request, because it seems so in excess of what's required. And again, on page 22, it references that and kind of my hurdle with supporting this motion, as much as I do like to preserve the character of neighborhoods.
Anyone else wishing to comment? Any other discussion on this matter? Okay, I'm not going to be supporting the motion either. I think that it will affect the character of the neighborhood, and I think that it would set a precedent that this particular lot, some of the other lots that could take advantage of this precedence may not have the same character or may not have the same aspects that this lot does. I don't think that the petitioner has proved that future need is not there, and I'm particularly swayed by the fact that the community council is opposed to this. So, with that, we shall vote.
Can you clarify a yes and a no vote for us?
Yes vote would approve. Are you okay? Okay, a yes vote will approve the, hang on, the request to vacate the right-of-way, and a no vote would deny that. A yes vote will approve the request for the vacation, and a no vote would not. That motion does not pass, and the right-of-way has not been vacated. Move on to, I don't know if we need to.
Madam Chair, could we take a few-minute break, please?
Not yet. We still have another vacation.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
That's right. May I have a positive motion on the vacation of the screening easement? Mr. Krieger.
In the case of S11756-1, move to approve the vacation and rededication of the 20-foot by 290-foot screening easement along the east boundary of Lot 3, Seabury subdivision.
Seconded by Ms. Stolpe. Mr. Krieger, would you speak to your motion?
Also opposed to this for the same reasons. I think it's been mooted by our previous action in any case. So I'll be voting against it.
Okay. Any other discussion? And we should vote. A yes vote would approve the vacation of the screening easement, and a no vote would disapprove it. And that motion does not pass, and the screening easement is not vacated. Moving on to the plat. Mr. Krieger and Ms. Stolpe. Seconds.
So my motion is to approve the plat, subject to the 6 conditions in the department's recommendation.
I think the point is moot, but I think we should vote anyway, so.
Well, I'm not sure it's moot or whether or not the plat should be.
Without the vacation, this resizing of the plat is not.
All right.
Resizing of the lot's not there.
Okay. So I do oppose it then.
Okay. No, I don't think we're done. Okay. The motion does not pass, and the plat is denied. We'll come up here in a minute. And Ms. Stolpe would like to have a recess. And as such, that's the first break, so you guys are free to go.
You want a candy bar?
Oh, okay.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. This is a request for a public hearing review for additional information of a preliminary plat that was previously approved. It also includes a request to vacate a 10-foot telephone and electric T&E easement that's located in the section line common to sections 8 and 9. As mentioned, this plat was approved on September 2nd, 2009. The Platting Board did grant a 60-month approval for a 448-acre subdivision to subdivide 3 tracts into 40 lots and 7 tracts. They also approved vacation of section line easements within the subdivision, as well as a 5-phase plan that was approved for a proposed Holton Hills subdivision. At the time, the original approval was subject to 22 conditions, and one of them was to come back with additional information. The additional information was requested based on that this is a very unique site. It is impacted by streams, wetlands, prairies, variable and steep topography, and major creeks setbacks as well. For Glacier Creek on the south and Tiny Creek that meanders through the property along the northern portion of the petition site adjacent to Crow Creek Road. The items that needed a second look, or to have the Platting Board have an opportunity to look at, was to show the topography, the building footprint, the requirement that 30% natural vegetation, driveway access to each lot, as well as the final location of the Iditarod section, the Girdwood section of the Iditarod Trail be shown so that the board could determine that, yes, these lots do indeed appear to be developable, given all of the environmental constraints, as well as the request for a major trail that would be adjoining the developable area of the subdivision. On the original preliminary plat, there was a 50-foot wide easement for what is now an existing trail that was constructed. It was constructed without the knowledge of the Heritage Land Bank at the time, and now there is limited developable area within this property, and the easement for that existing trail does impact some of the lots. And as said at the previous public hearing, a portion of the constructed trail will have to be relocated in order to ensure that the easement for that Iditarod Trail is outside the boundary of any of the developed lots, parking area, trailhead parking area, etc. There are quite a number of regulations that apply to development in Girdwood. There is their own set of Girdwood land use regulations. The required yard setbacks vary. The width of the required yard setbacks varies depending on the size of the lot. There are adopted plans, and so Condition 22 was added to the preliminary plat approval just to demonstrate to the Platting Board that, yes, this subdivision can be developed within the parameters of all of the applicable regulations, and given the limitations of the very sensitive environmental constraints that affect development of this property. And in general, the information submitted by the applicant does meet those conditions of does meet the requirements of that Condition 22. It conforms to those requirements. What was not shown were the shared driveways, and traffic engineering did request that certain driveways be shared throughout this subdivision, and in order to record a final plat, they will have to get approval of those shared driveways to ensure that they meet the municipal driveway standards in terms of slope and the adequate landing for prior to entering traveled right-of-way. the survey work, the requirement to show the new easement for the relocated Iditarod Trail as it affects within this portion of the petition site may have been a little premature because the survey work could not be done for the new location and determined. And the non-motorized trails coordinator had absolutely no objection to resolving that location of the Girdwood Iditarod Trail prior to finalizing the plat. As mentioned, this plat will be finalized in phases, so there is adequate time to determine where that easement needs to be. It should be noted that all of the conditions of the September 2nd, 2009 preliminary plat do remain in force, and those conditions will be resolved as the plat is being finalized. The department and the reviewing agencies had no objection to vacating that 10-foot T&E easement as it runs in a southwest to northeast direction within a section line easement that had been vacated. There are apparently not utilities within that easement, and it does bisect right through a number of the lots. So the department does recommend approval of the request to vacate that 10-foot T&E easement, as well as approval of this additional information, subject to 3 conditions, and that is, the first one has been amended, and I believe that there was a handout showing the amendment of the revised condition, and that reads, resolving the final location of the 50-foot wide easement for the Girdwood Iditarod Trail in coordination with the non-motorized trail coordinator and the Girdwood Trails Committee, and that's prior to recording a final plat. And the other is obtaining approval from traffic engineering of a revised layout showing the shared driveways, and placing a note on the plat that was required by one of the utilities that all areas within the Greenbelt easement utilized for electric installation and maintenance, including the installation of service lines, will not be revegetated by the electric utility. These areas will be planted with grass seed. That came from Chugach Electric, and it was recommended to the greatest extent possible that rather than utilities being located along the rear of all the lot lines as is traditionally, they'd be located along the front property boundaries that already will be disturbed for driveway access, et cetera, and road construction. And to leave the rear of most of the lots as undisturbed natural vegetation, it preserves the slopes, and it also does satisfy one of the requirements of the Girdwood land use regulations. And that, thank you, Madam Chair, that concludes the presentation. Thank you.
I have a question. Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. O'Brien, I noticed in the department recommendations on revising the preliminary plat that you're talking about the final location of a 50-foot wide Girdwood Iditarod Trail. And yet I noticed in many other places in the packet that we received that it appears as a 100-foot wide to 200-foot wide trail. And I wonder if you could speak to that, please.
Through the Chair, Ms. Stopey. Actually, the study that was done for that Iditarod Trail stated that the actual width of the trail would be 6 to 8 feet wide. There is a request that it be 200 feet wide from the community, but in this location, it would take up a significant amount of the developable area. There is not a requirement in that study that it be 1 to 200 feet wide. There is already a significant easement for the Glacier Creek that parallels the Iditarod Trail. And the 50-foot wide easement for that Iditarod Trail does exceed what is required by AMC 2180 for trail width. So the 50-foot width does exceed what Title 21 currently requires, and there was not a requirement within that study, the Girdwood Iditarod, or the Iditarod Trail study, that it be 1 to 200 feet wide. In locations that are undevelopable and identified for public open space on the Girdwood land use plan, it is conceivable that a trail easement could be that wide because it won't be in close proximity to developable area, because this portion of the petition site is zoned GR3, which is allowing single-family residential development. And there are significant portions of the other portions of the 488-acre site that the Girdwood land use plan has identified for open space. And I believe in the Girdwood Trail is supposed to actually extend all the way to Eagle River. So there may be portions of that trail that are indeed that wide, but not necessarily in this location.
Just one other question. Thank you, Ms. O'Brien. And just one other question then. You use the phrasing resolving the issue. Who resolves it? Who participates in that? Who makes the decision on the width of the trail in this particular location?
The width of the trail in this location is resolved with the 50-foot width. Also, the non-motorized trails coordinator, as well as the Girdwood Trails Committee. And the location of that relocated portions of the trails will be resolved with the non-motorized trails coordinator and the Girdwood Trails Committee. The petitioner has offered a 50-foot wide easement for the Girdwood Iditarod Trail. The Platting Board approved that with its previous action on September 2nd. So ultimately, the Platting Board is making that decision for that easement. It's the location of the easement that needs to be amended.
Any other questions of staff? Mr. Krieger.
Through the chair, Mr. Krieger, because 50 feet was shown on the preliminary plat that was approved by the Platting Board in September.
So then, at this point, have they dedicated that easement, or they haven't dedicated?
Through the chair, Mr. Krieger, the easement will be dedicated with the resolution of the relocated portions of the trail, and it will be dedicated actually when the final plat is recorded.
You may.
In the plat that we have before it, there is a dotted line that says proposed trail easement dedicated by the plat. So if I'm following this, we should disregard that because the actual location is going to be worked out later.
Through the chair, Mr. Krieger, that was carried forward from the previous plat. This is exactly how it was shown on the previous plat. And between September and this current date, they were not, the survey for the relocated portions of the trail was not able to be done due to the weather. And so they just continued to show where it was on the preliminary plat, and it will be relocated based on a survey when that can be done, and that relocation will be in coordination with the non-motorized trails coordinator and the Girdwood Trails Committee. Through the chair, Mr. Krieger, if I can step back, yes, the Girdwood Board of Supervisors and the Trails Committee is a committee of the supervisors. They are routed along with all other reviewing agencies. They're like any other community. They're like a community council, and they get routed with all this information that you received. If I can step further back, when the plat was being prepared to present to the board for the September meeting, the applicant did work with the Girdwood Trails subcommittee in preparing the original preliminary plat. So they have been involved throughout the process. I did not receive specific comments from the Trails Committee.
Any other questions of staff? Ms. Taylor.
Thank you. Through the chair, Ms. O'Brien, it's my understanding that we're looking at this resubmittal tonight for the public hearing. We're looking for the 6 items that we included in Condition 22 from September's case. One of the things that we're looking at is 30% existing natural vegetation being shown for these lots. And I noticed that what's shown is this 30% existing vegetation is often shown on cut slopes. There will be no vegetation. How does the city handle that when this is actually being built?
Through the chair, Ms. Taylor, as it's a requirement for in the Girdwood land use regulations, the cut slopes were shown on here. Each individual plot plan for a new structure, that plot plan will have to comply with the 30% retention of natural vegetation.
As a follow-up then, so if this goes through as is shown here, and then there is no vegetation on it, when the homeowner comes in to develop, will they have to find 30% somewhere outside of those cut slopes, or could they actually show a cut slope as natural vegetation?
They will have to provide 30% undisturbed natural vegetation when they develop the lot, and if there are cut slopes, they will have to be outside the cut slopes.
Thank you.
Any other questions of staff? Mr. Krieger. Oh, you're gone?
Through the chair, Mr. Krieger, it was overlooked for the first preliminary plat. It was realized that there was that T&E easement that would still be located and would still bisect through lots and building sites. So therefore, it was along with satisfying the items described in Condition 22, the request for the vacation of the T&E easement was also added as this was a public hearing.
Any other questions of staff? Mr. Young.
Thank you. Through the chair. Mr. O'Brien, what is the intended use of the property on the southeast side of the proposed trail that's shown on the maps? Oh, sure.
Are you on sheet 3 or 4, Mr. Young? I'm not sure what Southwest, I'm not sure what you're talking about. What you're questioning.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bryan, I'm on sheet 2, and I'm looking to the southeast, and my concern is on the trail, is there going to be vegetation disturbance on the south or the southeast side of the proposed trail?
South of the south?
It'd be the lower part of the map.
Through the chair, Mr. Young, that is open space. Glacier Creek runs through this area, currently has a 200-foot easement. There is a proposal to match the easement on the south side, on the north side of the creek. It has, in other sections for Glacier Creek, a portion of that 100-foot easement either side of the creek has been reduced, but that whole area south of the developed lots is open space.
Thank you.
Any other questions of staff? Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing. Could we hear from the petitioner or the petitioner's representative, please?
Good evening. My name is Dave Hale. I'm R&M Consultants representing the petitioner Heritage Land Bank in this matter. We have no objection to recommendations of the staff, and I'd like to reserve my time for rebuttal to answer any questions that you have.
9 minutes, 47 seconds. Any questions for Mr. Hale? Mr. Krieger.
When you were here last time, there was a lot of folks from the Girdwood community, or it seemed to me, I recall there being some folks, and they had some concerns about how this was going to go through. Did you meet with the Girdwood community, the Board of Supervisors, and the trail folks?
We did.
How did that go?
I went down, we met with the Trails Committee in regard to the width of this easement. There were quite a few comments that they wanted to be 100 foot or 200 foot, and there is no requirement. It's left up to the landowners. So what we did is we went to the community through their councils to see what they wanted, and the Trails Committee was fine with 50 foot. They thought that was adequate, and that's what we discussed with them. I went to a Board of Supervisors meeting after the last hearing as well and met with those folks, and I answered their questions. We had one person show up in regard to it, and they wondered about the width and the easement, and we told them what we had intended with the 50-foot easement, and they thought it was adequate as well. So we haven't met with any everyone said that they're for the subdivision. They just wanted to make sure that this trail was protected, and we assured them that it would be, and they seemed fine with that.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Hale? Ms. Stolpe?
In reading through the public comments that we received, there seemed to be a number of them that have a different viewpoint on the width of this trail. Now, they must be talking about this specific issue. It does say, I'm looking at the one from the Glacier District Ranger, which was quite lengthy, and she specifically was talking about your project. And at the December Girdwood Trails Committee meeting, Trail Committee members expressed the desire to have the full 200 easement as resolved by GBOS. I guess that's the Girdwood Board of Supervisors. Forest Service also supports establishing a 200-foot easement, and it goes on, and then there are several others that support a wider easement. some of them not necessarily 200 feet, others 100 foot, but more than 50 feet. So could you help us resolve what we're reading versus what you've told us, please?
Yes, ma'am. Regards to the width of this, there is no requirement for a width for a trail through this area. It's owned by a Heritage Land Bank. The requirement is that there be an easement, but the width is to be determined by the landowner in conjunction with members of the community, of course, as good neighbors. The 100-foot and the 200-foot, I understand that people would like to have as much width as they possibly can get for the trail to preserve, the wilderness experience. And in truth, the trail itself is, 4 or 5 feet wide. I've hiked it. I think a lot of people have. And 50 feet would adequately protect it. And most of the community members that we talk to down there through the Trails Committee and the Board of Supervisors as well agree that 50 foot is adequate. Although they'd like to see 100, they'd like to see 200, it's really not feasible in a development area like this because there is a subdivision that needs to be built in that area. Everyone that we spoke with agrees that the subdivision would be a good thing for their community. They want to preserve the trails. The trail is an important part of this planned development, and so we want to protect it in a reasonable fashion. And 200 feet would prohibit the development of this development. There would not be room. The trail also falls within this 200-foot corridor that's an access easement along Glacier Creek. That request to vacate 75 feet has been amended, so we're only going to try to vacate whatever part of that easement actually falls within our subdivision. So everything that is to the south and the east of those lots, the planned subdivision, will remain open space. So the majority of that trail, even though it's protected by a 50-foot easement, will be contained within that open space, and there will be no development at all in that area.
Any other questions for Mr. Hale? Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing. Thank you, Mr. Hale. Anyone wishing to speak in case S11650-3 Holton Hills?
Yes, my name is Dwayne Schultz. I'm with the Goodwood Board Trails Committee, and I would like to submit to you from the Diderot Historical Trail Access Group, which runs from Seward all the way to Nome. We're trying to get the trail all the way through. Submit this to you.
Thank you.
The first thing I'd like to say is with the historical trail, it is one of 10 national historical trails in the United States. And to go through Goodwood, we've worked on it for 4 years with the Heritage Land Bank and with the Bureau of Land Management and with the Chugach National Forest Service and with the National Park Service to get this trail in. They were very helpful in getting us being able to work on this trail, and we still work on this trail to this day. We would like the 200-foot easement, but in Goodwood, we're tickled to death to get 50 feet because the only dedicated trail in Goodwood is the bike path along the highway. No other trail is dedicated in the Goodwood Valley. So I think working with the developers here, things can work out for the trail. We went out and looked at the change areas there. We wish the lots could go back some because we're just in their setbacks on the 50-foot easement. Pushing the trail farther, you're going into the river itself. But we think we can work it out. So any questions, we'd be glad to help you.
Any questions for Mr. Schultz?
Sure.
Mr. Fuller.
So this development is not impeding the trail in any way?
It doesn't. It actually helps the trail because finally we get the trail dedicated, and that's what we're all after there. I think we're all for the trail, but also we know that the lots will help the valley too.
Mr. Creek.
Mr. Schultz, you said you were with the Trail Committee. You have a position or a title with those?
No, I'm just a member of the committee. I was president of the committee for about 8 years.
So, but you're comfortable sort of speaking on behalf of them here, is that?
Yes, I was asked to speak on behalf of the Trails Committee. And the lines that I gave there, the trail, we do like to have 200 feet for the whole trail. That way the trail is protected and you have a greenway for the trail. But that is something, again, in the Goodwood Valley is pretty special. It is one of the few places where the trail is that we do have the subdivisions and people living. So, you know, we have to look at reality too.
So just to be clear, you're okay with this being only a 50-foot easement on behalf of?
Yes, we've gone through and looked at it, and that's where it's at.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Schultz? Mr. Young.
Mr. Schultz, with the trails shown on the maps that we have right now, there's some impact with the buffer zones and the lots, and I know that needs to be resolved. I understand that the surveying data isn't available yet, but what's the likelihood that these will be resolved?
Well, we went out and looked. We know where the trouble areas are. Immediately when we seen the preliminary plats, we knew exactly where those problem areas are. And, you know, again, we're wanting to dedicate the trail, and we think it can be worked out through there.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Schultz? Thank you. Anyone else wishing to testify in case 11650-3 Holton Hills? Anyone at all? Mr. Hale, would you like to use your rebuttal time? You're fine? Okay. With that, I'll close the public hearing. And the matter rests with the board. Can I have a positive motion? Ms. Stolpe.
Madam Chair, I move for the approval of case number S-11650-3, approval of the request to vacate the 10-foot wide T&E easement running southwest northeast within the petition site, subject to the non-objection of all the affected utilities.
Mr. Fuller seconds. Would you speak to your motion, please, Ms. Stolpe?
I'm speaking in favor of the motion based on the testimony that we have received from staff and from the public and the petitioner.
Anyone else wish to comment? Is there any objection to the motion? Seeing none, the motion passes and the easement is vacated. Moving on to the preliminary plat. Ms. Stolpe?
Madam Chairman, I move for the approval of, in the matter of case number S-11650-3, moving for the approval of the revised preliminary plat for 60 months, subject to resolving the final location of the 50-foot wide National Historic Iditarod Trail. Do I need to read all that?
No, you don't need to read them. Just
okay.
say.
But I just wanted to change that wording, resolving the final location as opposed to providing. Approving numbers 1, 2, and 3, changing the word providing to resolving.
So subject to the revised department recommendations. Okay. Conditions. And Ms. Moses seconds. Could you speak to your motion, please?
Excuse me just a moment. Yeah, I've got it right here. Thank you. I'm moving for the approval for the same reasons that I expressed earlier.
Is there any other comments? Are there any objection to the motion? If not, the motion passes and the plat is approved for 60 months. The last case on the agenda tonight is case S11788-1, the U.S. Postal Service Main Carrier Station. May we have the staff's presentation, please?
This is a simple request to subdivide one tract into two. There are no vacations or subdivision variances being requested with this case. The only issue of concern with this case is that Parks advocates wanted to make sure that there would be no road built between the library where we are now and the park connecting Barrow Street to Denali Street. And that's not a part of this case. No such road is any part of this case or would be encouraged by this case. For such a road to be built between the library and the park, the library would have to subdivide or dedicate right-of-way in order for such a road to occur. The department recommends approval of this simple subdivision from one tract into two, subject to conditions 1 through 15 on pages 8 and 9 of the packet. There are two changes that staff would like to make. The first change is on condition number 4. The condition reads, resolve with fire the need for a new fire hydrant on tract A3. I would like to add the wording, or an access agreement to use an existing hydrant. So it would read, resolve with fire the need for a new fire hydrant on tract A3, or an access agreement to use an existing hydrant. That would be an existing hydrant on another lot. And then condition 12, I'd like to add the words resolve the need in front of provide to PM&E groundwater hydrology analysis. A groundwater hydrology analysis may not be necessary if the petitioner is able to provide other scientific studies showing that the PM&E's needs are satisfied. So with that, that's all I have.
Are there any questions for Mr. McLaughlin? I have a question. Why isn't this a short plat?
Because of the potentially controversial nature of the plat, but you're correct, it could be handled as a short plat.
Okay, thank you. With that, we'll open the public hearing and hear from the petitioner's representative.
Madam Chair, members of the board, my name is Tim Potter with Dulwich Cam. Technically, because it's publicly owned, that's why it's not being done as a short plat per Title 21. Again, tonight, I think this is relatively quick, and hopefully I'll be able to retain about 8 minutes for rebuttal, so we can all go home. Back in the mid-'70s, the U.S. Postal Service acquired this corner as a site for a sorting carrier center, and they had hopes at that time within their plan to have a larger facility and complex on the site. Over the last 30-plus years, they've determined that, in fact, the northern portion of the property is in excess of their needs, and they are moving forward to subdivide the property out so that the U.S. Postal Service can divest the northern portion of the property as excess property to their needs. With that in mind, this plat effectively does that, and I've reviewed the 15 conditions of approval as put forward by the staff, and in full agreement with them as modified by the staff tonight. Just to clarify, item number 4, the additional language that the staff has added simply reflects what the fire plan review people actually stated in their comments, which are located on page 39. So that there's 2 ways to provide adequate hydrant access or service to the property. One is to put in a new hydrant and or provide an easement, a cross easement basically, that would allow this property to have the fire department go to the hydrant on the adjacent property and be able to provide service that way. So one or the other. And that simply reflects this. As far as any park-associated issues, you'll see in the conditions of approval that the final design of the link between Barrow Street and B Street actually has to be reviewed and approved by the Parks Department, and that will be done, and it will have to go back through a public site plan review when any future development's done on the north part of that site. So with that in mind, I'd be happy to answer any questions and reserve the rest of my time for rebuttal, even though I don't believe there'll be any.
7 minutes, 36 seconds. Any questions for Mr. Potter? Ms. Taylor.
Thank you. Through the chair, which property is the hydrant located on?
It is on the restaurant site, the Burrito King.
Is that directly west of?
That's to the west, correct.
And there's currently no existing easement for a fire hydrant?
There is not. It is a fire hydrant that is run onto the Burrito King property to service as part of its required building permit standards on that site. It's effectively butting, it's in the landscape area directly next to the Postal Service property, and we don't believe that there'll be a problem negotiating an easement. So.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Potter? Mr. Story?
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Potter, I had one question. The fire department wouldn't use the fire hydrant without an easement?
If there's a fire, the fire department will respond and go to whatever hydrant they deem necessary. When a property is being developed and you go for your building permit and you have your layout, depending on the type of building, the rating of the building, and the use of the building, there's a requirement for a certain flow of water and a certain number of hydrants. So when you submit your plan, you have to identify the location of where those hydrants are going to be to meet the requirements. The existing hydrant would meet the needs on the west side of this tract. However, it's actually owned by the Burrito King because it was a hydrant that was put in to service their property when they did their building permit. When this project's done, that easement could not be granted, and an agreement reached that with the Burrito King that that line and hydrant could be used for meeting the building permit requirements, not so much the fire demand, but the building permit requirements for fire suppression on Tract A3, then the new U.S. Postal Service property would then have to provide an additional hydrant on their property to meet the building permit fire plan review requirements. So there might be a redundant hydrant, basically. So it's just a quirk of the system.
So couldn't condition number 4 stand as is? I mean, you're resolving the need for a fire hydrant regardless if there's an access easement or not.
It could. I'd feel more comfortable having the additional language in there that's really a reflection of the fire plan review and the fire marshal's comments per this plat. I think it helps give direction to everybody as we go forward to try and resolve these conditions of approval and then bring forward the real project. So,
thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions for Mr. Potter? If not?
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to testify in case S11788-1, U.S. Postal Service Main Carrier Station? Anyone at all? Okay, seeing none. Mr. Potter, do you have anything else you'd like to add? Okay, then we'll close the public hearing. And the matter rests with the board. If I could have a positive motion. Ms. Taylor.
In the matter of case S11596-1, U.S. Postal Service, I move for approval of the plat for 18 months subject to conditions 1 through 15 shown on pages 8 and 9 of the packet, with a modification to condition number 4 to add the language or an access agreement to use an existing hydrant, and on condition number 12 to insert the language resolve the need to before provide.
Ms. Stolpe, seconds. Could you speak to your motion, Ms. Taylor?
Based on the information presented by staff and by Mr. Potter, I'm comfortable that this plat is in the best interests of the municipality.
Any other comments? Any other discussion? Is there any objection to the motion? Seeing none, the motion passes and the plat is approved. Okay, that's the end of the new business portion. No scheduled persons to be heard. No reports. Board member comments. Do we have any board member comments? Motion to adjourn? Oh. I was directed that I should mention that there was an information item laid on the table about the official streets and highways plan, if you didn't catch that. Other than that, motion to adjourn?
Madam Chair?
Move to adjourn.
We're adjourned. Sorry.
I was just going to mention that the reorganization of the board occurs in March.
Okay. Next time, we reorganize. We should probably figure out what we're going to do before the meeting.